Hey guys, this is Paul from Plan B Paraguay. Today we're in Carew Cafe, enjoying some fresh OJ and the good weather. And we thought we'd make this video to discuss some of the changes we're noticing in regards to the document requirements for the residency program and how it's getting a little bit harder for people in some circumstances. Now, I think what's important to realize with all this, and what we've mentioned previously in our videos and on our Twitter, is just globally, residency options are becoming more difficult all around the world. Lots of people aren't happy where they're living, whether it's the UK, Canada, or Europe, and they're looking for options abroad. What's happening right now is countries like Paraguay and other residencies, they're becoming harder to obtain. You either see whether it's in a place like Panama, which completely changes the requirements, or a place like Portugal, where my understanding is they're shutting down the golden visa now. So not only do you have countries like Paraguay making things more difficult, but then also you have a lot of people around the world, Europe, United States, realizing that perhaps there's better options for them and starting to look into those options. So that's why we really emphasize on our Twitter and these videos that if you are interested in a Plan B residency and setting yourself up for the next phase of your life, now's really the time to do it, and it's not something that you should just sit on and not take any action on, because what you might find is down the track, the same opportunities aren't available to you. Okay, so let's get into the specifics about some of the changes we're noticing in the document requirements. First, let's talk about the naming on all your documents. Now, if you have the exact same name printed the exact same way on your birth certificate, on your criminal record check, and on your passport, this doesn't really apply to you. However, what we're finding is recently maybe they have 4 names on their birth certificate, but only 3 of those names on their passport, or vice versa. Or in some countries, we're noticing that the birth certificate might only have the person's first name and not the person's full name. Now, if you're in one of these situations, it's going to be difficult for us to submit those documents to immigrations and have them easily accepted. So in these circumstances, there's really 2 options you can have. Ideally, you're able to amend those documents in your country before you arrive in Paraguay. That's probably the simplest option. The second option is we have to reach out to the embassy that's related to your country on a case-by-case basis, get an exemption and an explanation that in this particular country, it's okay if those specific names don't match. As you can imagine, this process can take a lot longer and can delay your residency. So if you do happen to be one of the person that falls into that category, it's important to keep that in mind beforehand when you're planning your timeframes in regards to submitting those documents in Paraguay. The other thing is, let's talk about the different types of documents that you're submitting for your residency. Okay, let's talk about a very easy circumstance. Let's say, for example, you're French and you have French passport, French birth certificate, French criminal record check. Well, then there's no problems there, right? That's quite easy for immigrations to understand and process. But these days, that's in the minority. You know, people are traveling, they're living in other countries, they're getting citizenship in countries that they're not born in. And what we're finding is the requirements from immigrations in regards to the documents to approve those those pieces of information that you want to submit are getting more strict. So let me give you an example. Let's say, you're a guy from the States, but you've spent the last 3 years living in Mexico, and therefore you'd like to use the Mexican criminal record check. Well, that's great. However, you can't just simply submit the Mexican criminal record check. Immigrations is likely to ask, okay, prove to us that you've been living in Mexico. Now, what we're finding with our clients, the best documents that can prove this are ideally a driver's license that's older than that 3 years, because then we have an official government document that clearly shows you've been living in that country for that time, and therefore, verifies that that criminal record check is sufficient. The second thing you can also use is your visa. So obviously, if you're living in a different country from your passport, you're going to need a visa to live there. So if you can show your visa documentation and have a visa that starts before the 3 years and is valid for that 3 years, then that's something that we can use. Now there's a second thing with the documentation that I also want to highlight, and that's when your passport doesn't match your birth certificate. So again, this is quite common. You're born in country A, you move to country B, and eventually you're naturalized, and let's say you want to use the passport from country B because it's a stronger passport, it's a European passport, it's an American passport. That's great. However, just presenting the passport by itself, we're finding is no longer acceptable from immigrations. They are asking for you to submit your certification of naturalization or an equivalent document, as well as they're asking it to be apostilled. So again, if you fall into this category and you would like to use a passport that's not the one that you were born from, we ask you take that into consideration and you get those documents apostilled before you come to Paraguay as well. The third point I'd like to mention today is it's important to take into consideration the language of the documents that you're submitting. Obviously, if those documents are in Spanish, it's not a problem. But how Paraguay works is immigrations only accepts translations made by officially registered translators in Paraguay. Now at Plan B, we obviously have access to all those translators. However, Paraguay doesn't have a translator for every single language in the world. So I'll give you an example. Recently we had a client from Hungary, and when we confirmed on the official list of translators we can use, Hungary wasn't a language that was supported. So there's a few different options clients have in this circumstance. Now a lot of countries with a less common language, they will actually provide you their documents in another language. So potentially, I know for example people from Holland, they can have their documents provided in French or Spanish or English. And if that's the case, we recommend that, because then we can translate it using one of the official translators and there's no problems. But let's say, for example, your country doesn't do that. What you're going to have to do in this circumstance is you're going to have to use a local translator to translate your documents. However, then that translator is going to have that translation apostilled. So that's something again to consider when you're getting your documents ready for Paraguay, and also considering the amount of time things are going to take to be ready to come here and to complete your temporary residency. And finally, before we wrap things up, there's another thing that I thought I might bring to your attention, because what we're finding recently is that we're approached by clients that have used other immigration agencies, and unfortunately they've sent money to these immigration agencies and it just hasn't gone anywhere. For example, we had a client recently contact us, and this immigration agency is still asking for a $5,000 deposit before they start their residency. Now, Paraguay actually stopped this being a requirement over a year ago. So this other agency is just asking for money, taking it, and in this particular circumstance, not giving it back to their client. So just a little bit of advice. Obviously, it's up to you to decide who you want to work with. But if someone's asking for you to send them a lot of money before you're actually seeing them in person or really verifying that they're a trusted source, I would really consider you give a second thought to that and see if that's the best way to go about things. So here at Plan B Paraguay, we're a little bit different because we live and breathe Paraguay. We're not just some company that's recommending 10 different residencies that we really know very little about. We live here 24/7, we've lived here for years, and we're dedicated to helping people get their residency in Paraguay, get their Plan B, set up a better life. We're not Plan B Dubai, we're not Plan B Mexico. We're not one of these guys that pretends to be an expert in 10 different residencies. We focus purely on Paraguay. We specialize on Paraguay. The whole team here lives in Paraguay full time. We're buying houses here, we're setting up our families here. And we're here helping people get their residencies, helping people get their Plan B, and helping people start a better life in Paraguay. And what's important to us is when you move here, setting you up for success and living the type of life that you want to live in Paraguay. So if that's something that you're interested in, please click the link below and book a phone call with either me or one of my colleagues, or you can keep following us on YouTube or Twitter, where we're continually releasing new material on how you can live and get your best life in Paraguay. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you again soon.